Let's do this.
Good evening, guys, or afternoon, I guess it is today, depending on what your time zone is. Welcome back. It's time for a new episode of Coffee with Toffees. We're going to have a lot of fun. I got a great guest for you here today, but before I introduce the giant floating head next to me, I do want to first give a shout out to our sponsors, Asus Republic of Gamers, Razer, ProBuilt Systems, and of course, GameLeap.com, the only place where you can learn to play from a pro, like a pro, for making the show possible. Now, the other person who's making the show possible is none other than our guest, because without a guest, well, where would I be? You'd be listening to me talking, and nobody really wants that. So our guest today is, I'm going to try it, Muriel Kipspul Heisman? Heisman. Ah, the U got me.
It's if you think of German, Hausmann, people can kind of do it.
That makes sense. Now, are you German, or where are you from?
I'm from the Netherlands.
Okay.
So we are like swamp Germans.
Nice. We won't tell everybody from the Netherlands that you said that. So we know that you're from the Netherlands. Before we get into sort of talking about Fnatic at TI and the new team that they just announced and whether or not you're going to be part of the picture and sort of all of that stuff, I want to get to know you a little bit more because we talk a lot. And guys, for those of you who may be just joining the series, there's a lot of shuffles going on. There's a lot of chaos within the Dota scene. And you probably know, if you're a regular listener to the show, that I'm not into the drama. I don't like sort of rumor mongering and things like that. So really, I thought we should use this time to talk to the people that work behind the scenes in Dota. Let's talk to coaches, analysts, players who sort of are in transition, and just trying to get a perspective of what's going on in the scene. Last week we talked to Mott about his main stage performance and got a lot of really cool information about Moonduck, their future, his past. And so today we wanted to have Kipspul on to talk about sort of what happened behind the curtain at TI with Fnatic, as well as other places. So before we do that, let me know, what is your background? I've heard that you have a background that has something of an intellectual pedigree to it. I would assume that that's the case if you're doing statistics for a major team. What is your background?
My background is a bit of everything, actually. I graduated high school at 17 because I did the 5th and 6th year in one. And then I went to university with these really high expectations, like, this is it. I'm one of those young people that goes in there and storms through. And I'm 8 years on now, and I've done 3 different studies, and none of them ended up being exactly the thing for me. So I've seen a lot of university life, but I never actually got a degree.
Okay, so 8 years, is that straight through or off and on?
Off and on. I had some jobs in between. I was the online content editor for a magazine for a while. I've had a call center job, so I was one of the have you tried turning it off and on again people. But I've also studied biochemical engineering, chemistry, and mechanical engineering.
So for those of you who are listening in the States, and you may not know this, Kips, it's pretty common for the university level in the U.S. to be 4 years, maybe 5 if you're like me and want to take a victory lap. That said, taking time off and then going back and sort of bouncing back and forth is very difficult to do here in the U.S. Transferring credits is a nightmare. Is it more accepted in the Netherlands to sort of take your time going through the process?
It has been, but the system is slowly getting chipped away at, which I think is really very sad. Because I personally have needed these years to figure out that this wasn't going to work for me. And if I would have been in the US, I would probably have dropped out at some point, never gotten back in, and I would still have this huge student debt.
Especially here in the US, because the rates are insane right now. How is it in the Netherlands? I know that some countries have free college. I know that some places it's as expensive as the U.S. I mean, private universities here are in excess of $24,000 to $30,000 a year. Public institutions are 10 to 15 sometimes. Is it pretty crazy over there in the Netherlands, or do you guys have a pretty comfortable system?
The system as it was when I started was really very good, in my opinion. You get a certain base amount of money depending on whether you still live at home or if you go and live on your own next to university. You get travel compensation, and all of this is you borrow it, and then if you finish a degree within 10 years of you starting, it will actually get the debt will get wiped away.
Oh wow.
And you can borrow extra on top of that because it's not a livable amount of money, but it's enough to cover tuition. And if you borrow more, that debt is frozen up until those 10 years have passed, and then you can start paying it off.
Interesting. So basically, it seems like they give you a way to encourage completion for students who are going to college. That's kind of a cool feature. Okay, so you went to college. You've been exploring life for 8 years. Tried a lot of different jobs. You were working in IT, if my memory serves me correctly, at the time that you got applied and started working for Fnatic, and had a dream of sort of being a writer for Dota. How did you go from being I dream of being a writer for Dota to sitting in the Fnatic box at TI as their chief analyst? Like what was the transition there? And then we'll talk more about what got you into Dota in the first place afterwards.
Yeah, because that transition, I never thought that I would start doing this, but I guess that's how things happen in general. You never think you're going to do what you end up doing. What happened for me is that I was a really diehard Liquid fan, and I guess I still am, but I was working for the enemy for a while there.
We're going to talk about that, by the way, guys, in a minute, because Liquid was Fnatic's kryptonite until TI, but I don't want to get into that yet, so continue, please.
Yeah. Well, I was actually looking at Liquid's previous kryptonite, Alliance, for the Shanghai Major. And Liquid had just boot camped, and I was very nervous about them winning this match in Shanghai. And I have a pretty good relationship with Jarex, with Matu, so I was like, I want to ask them, are they feeling confident? Can they win? But I was like, no, they're busy. I'll look at some stats. And then 9 hours passed, and when I was done, I had this huge list of screenshots with scrollings all over it, and it basically said that that Liquid had done the correct things during their bootcamp. They changed their playstyle enough, and I was confident they were going to win. And I bet on that when you still could. I got some really lovely arcanas out of that. That was a lot of fun because they won.
Right.
And not a lot of people saw that coming.
So how did that? I've heard that spreadsheet had something to do with you getting hired for Fnatic. How did that happen, or how did they get their hands on it and see, oh, wow, she figures stuff out that nobody else does?
Yeah, so what happened is about a month later, I bragged about my results to a friend of mine, Card Dota. And he was like, dude, this is really very good. People could use this. And he had been sending documents of his along to teams. And he was like, I'm just going to send yours too. People need to see this. And that was incredibly generous of him. And that's how he was in touch with Fnatic at the time. And Fnatic were looking for someone who could do full time. So I made an improved version of that document. It turned out into like a 28-page Word document. Really, really, really in-depth. And I sent that to them, and they were like, we want this.
Nice. So that's pretty cool. And then so you made a transition, and I think it's actually really entertaining to me that for those of you who don't know, when Fnatic hired Kips, literally from what I understand, until the moment you arrived and met them, like right before you met them in person, they thought that you were a guy because they had approached everything from a completely, I don't know, asexual standpoint, where it was just like, let's talk stats when we get together and let's talk about you working for us. Was that a cool moment, or just kind of an eye-opening? It's weird that they thought I was a guy out of the box.
Well, it's not quite true. The fact that I was not a guy came out basically when I was about to have the Skype call with Eric and Karn about my contract, basically. And then Rain was actually, oh yeah, I've had you on Skype for quite a while now, and your name is Muriel. That should have sort of ticked me off, but no. It was, they didn't know up until that point, and then after I got hired, I think the team still didn't know, so I introduced myself in the group WeChat, and everyone had to, according to Mushi, everyone had to send a picture of themselves. I still don't know if that's actually the truth. But I did, and then they were like, Okay. Hi.
Very nice. So they found out you're now there. Now, before we go into talking about the Fnatic 3 months or so, um, I want to know somebody who goes to school for 8 years, who's into sort of all these different things. How long have you been into gaming, and specifically, what got you into Dota in the first place and sort of kept you analyzing at the level that you are?
Mm, Gaming was basically something I started with as a kid, really young. My dad worked in IT, and he was part of the big IT boom.
Mm,
So we had computers in the house very early, and he was a big fan of all kinds of games. I remember sitting behind him with my two sisters, and we were all watching him play Tomb Raider. That
nice.
was that was great. And so eventually, here in the house, we had a three-computer setup for, well, basically little LANs. So I used to
Mhm.
game against my dad and my middle sister, things like Age of Mythology and Unreal Tournament 2004.
That was a good one.
It was a great game.
Yeah.
I'm not nearly as good as it when I try it again now as that I remember.
I 100% with you there. So you sort of got into it at that point. When did you discover Dota?
I discovered Dota because I played Warcraft 3,
Mhm.
and I think I actually had Dota installed at one point, but I had no idea how it worked. I just couldn't get it working really. I didn't even know how the hero select was supposed to go. So I just sort of gave up on that. And then years later in Germany on a city trip, I ran into a guy. We talked about games, and he was like, "Oh, you liked Warcraft 3? You should try League of Legends." I was like, "Okay."
Sorry.
I know, but that is the way it happened, I'm afraid. Mm,
It seems like it happens to people a lot. Now, here's a question for you. I know a lot of leaguers. I think we all know a lot of leaguers since it's this, vanilla of top down games. A lot of leaguers don't like to move to Dota because they find that the level of adaptation and the level of difficulty is pretty high. Did you make that transition and struggle with it, or do you still play League and not tell anybody? Like, what's the story?
I don't have the time to play League, man. I haven't actually had any interest. I looked at League and it was like, oh, this is okay. But this was around the same time as it was between TI1 and TI2.
Okay.
So the first buzz around Dota was already starting. So I actually decided that I liked Dota more. I'd like to try that better because there was Toby casting all these
Mm,
matches and it was really hype. It just looked like the kind of thing I wanted to get into more. Heard people say it was more difficult. I was like, ah.
nice.
But beta keys were still in very short supply, so I didn't actually get a key until quite a while later.
Mm,
So I played League in the meanwhile.
makes sense. A lot of people forget that. Sometimes you have to play League or Han because you just can't get a beta key. It is what it is. All right.
Bad times.
Right, tough times for everybody. It was the dark times. All right, so let's talk a little bit about working for Fnatic in sort of an analyst perspective. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, because we already brought it up, is this liquid rivalry. I sort of want to call it. So ESL Frankfurt, for those of you guys who don't know, and the Manila Major, pretty much right after one after another. Liquid knocked out Fnatic. Both times, 2-0, I believe the scores were. And it sort of looked like Liquid was the kryptonite of Fnatic. Now, you guys got to TI. You beat them to advance to play MVP. And I think you 2-0'd them too, which was pretty impressive. What was it, A, what was it like for you and the team to finally beat them when it mattered? And B, was there a major breakthrough that actually made that possible?
I think at TI it's all about pressure really,
Hmm.
and we could see that Liquid was under way more pressure than we were, and I think for them because they'd been beating us, right? If you beat a team, it's not personal,
Mm.
but if they beat you twice and you're getting kind of pissed off about it, it was personal to us, yeah.
Hmm.
So I think that was actually one of the bigger, like, as a feeling, that
Hmm.
was probably the biggest victory of TI.
Nice, and deservedly so, especially sort of coming off. I know that in other tournaments, that was one of the first things people talked about was, can Fnatic beat Liquid? In the past, it's proved impossible. In an interview with Swiss TV around the time of Frankfurt, you said one of the biggest issues with Fnatic at that time is communication. And you guys did a great job at TI, finished very, very high. It was really impressed a lot of people. Is that something that you were able to help with in the analyst position to sort of figure out how to fix those communication issues?
Yeah, because the idea is that I come at the entire team thing from an outsider's perspective. So I also, especially before TI, I tried to remain out of the drafting and the decision-making process as much as possible. I just supply the information. And if you look from the outside at a team who are playing, you don't even really look at what they're doing right now. You just look at who talks, what kind of tone do they use, how do they describe things, what kind of things do they communicate, what do they not say, like what do they forget to say, what do they think is irrelevant to say. All those things, if you sort of disconnect them from the game that's being played, then you can tell them, guys, you're slipping again. You're saying, kill this dude, when
Right.
you should be going, go on the puck, or go on the lion, go on, I don't care, player name, but not this guy,
Interesting.
for example.
That makes sense. And that's something I think we don't often think about when we talk about, and this is maybe a misperception in the scene, when we talk about a team's having trouble with communication, generally I think the assumption is, well, they hate each other. When you say communication, does that mean that Fnatic wasn't necessarily infighting? It was more just they didn't know how to talk during a game?
Yeah, exactly. That was the biggest problem. If you have one guy that's supposed to be calling shots during a certain part of the game, and he isn't for some reason, then you gotta figure out what to do to make him do that. You wait until they have a game where he does do that, and then you see, all right, what changed, and you try to recreate those circumstances.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Interesting. So here's another interesting comment that I saw from you in an interview, and you said that if your team were an army, you think of yourself as the weaponsmith for that army. It's sort of a obscure, interesting metaphor. Can you explain a little more about what that means to you?
It means that because I am not very good at Dota, right? Mechanically, I'm not very good. I am not gonna go anywhere near pro within my lifetime. So that means I stay out of the decision-making process. I do none of the actual fighting myself. So I'm not a general. People, that's like a coach can be the general. He can say we approach it from this side or from this side. I just give the information. I tell them, all right, starting at 15 minutes, Navi is going to ward around the Roche pit, and they're going to do that for the rest of the game. And they'll probably have 2 wards up there, and not just 1. And then the team can decide, all right, what do we do with that? Like, do we ignore that area? Do we go and contest it? Do we capture that area before they do and keep the pressure up? But that's their decision. I just tell them what's going to happen.
Interesting. For those of you who might hear some noise in the background, by the way, my son just got home from school. We decided to do the interview a little bit early so Kipspul could sleep. What are you? You're in the Netherlands right now, right?
Yeah, I'm
So
at
it's
home right now.
It would have been 4 a.m. at our normal broadcast time, so that's sort of why we're doing this now. For those of you who are asking. Now, regarding sort of what you said, you find something and mention to the team and see if they want to integrate it. You did an interview with Killscreen, and you gave an example of sort of a success that you had in that concept. And I'm going to read through it real quick so you guys sort of get a context here. You said, let's take Fnatic's upper bracket win against LGD Gaming. During my research, I noticed a ward that LG had never managed to find in D ward, and it worked for us too. I also knew one of LGD's signature smokes. Timings and showed the players, and lo and behold, LGD smoked during the exact window, and we dodged their attack. Is that the norm, or sort of the exception to the rule that something works out this exceedingly well for you as an analyst?
It's about 50-50.
Oh, wow.
It's about discovering the pattern, really. And for some teams like DC, MVP, they have very distinct warding patterns, for example. And you can really do something with that, because a team that just puts wards somewhere, I can tell my team where they used to put those wards, but as long as I can't see the logic of the enemy supports, I can't actually say for certain that it's going to happen again. And that's the 50% that doesn't work out, basically. But the other 50% is if you see this is how they want to win the game and they facilitate it in this way. That will basically always hold true.
And it seems, and I think if you ask most players, 100 gold is well worth a 50% chance of, say, removing vision that an opponent would need at a crucial time. So it does seem interesting. Now, is that I guess a part of it, you say looking for patterns. Is that an important part of an analyst's job as much as finding patterns in their opponents? Do you also look for patterns within your own team that you can sort of break so that they don't get caught out by other analysts, I guess?
I haven't actually, like, only half of the teams, I think, have an analyst right now. And in a tournament, there is not really enough time for me to do that. So while I want to do that, I have basically only managed to do so during our boot camp pre-TI. Because that was the only time we had, well, time.
Right.
The rest of it was just a whirlwind of next match, next match, next match.
Well, it seems like maybe boot camps and scrims are sort of the best time to say, hey, here's a bad habit that we have. Let's mix it up and sort of break the opponents. So that's interesting. It's fun to sort of see where an analyst looks at all of this stuff. Now, I know that you said in an interview that you like to spend a minimum of like 8 to 10 hours per team that you're analyzing as a breakdown. In some instances, you spend days working on it. I think a good example is the game against Escape in the best of ones at TI. You said you had spent days preparing for that match for obvious reasons. Big deal to win that game. It's over in 26 minutes. How does that make you feel? You spent all this time prepping. The game ends in 26 minutes.
That felt really good.
Good.
Yeah. That was because the mentality that I at least want to be in is, well, I already said it just now, is next match, next match. And if I would have spent even an hour less preparing Escape, and we wouldn't have won.
Right, that's true, and it led to a really good run. And I think Escape was a challenge for you guys going into it. A good question that's actually coming from Twitch chat right now is Hakundayan wants to know: when you do your studying, when you watch those replays, do you watch the opponent's perspective, or do you just sort of watch the overall directed camera sort of deal?
I don't actually watch a lot of replays.
Okay.
This is one of the things where the team is way better than me. So they watch replays because their minds are basically wired up to the game in the sort of way that they go through it at 8 times speed. And they watch everything. Sometimes they slow down at exactly the right moments. It's wizardry. If you see like Ohio going through a game like that, it's crazy.
It's kind of
cool. He goes through like 5 different games in 20 minutes.
Wow.
And he gets things out of that. So in order to provide the different perspective, I mostly look at Dota buff, I look at YASP. I can look at the end of game stats now from the Dota client itself. I spend a lot of time in my Excel sheets. And I basically only go into the replay if I see something weird in the stats and I want to know, where did that come from?
Interesting. So it's mostly compilation of numbers that sort of drives you and the players. And so like you can give a number, you can use those numbers to advise players who then could go back and sort of put that together with the replays they've watched to come up with, with strategies. Interesting. Now you said, and this is specifically about Fnatic at TI, you said in your blog, and you guys can find this on Medium, actually, if you Google Kipspul Medium, it'll pop up right away. You said that, and this is a quote, daring to dream of the Aegis is what killed our chances of ever getting it. Can we dig into that statement a little bit more and tell me about it?
Well, basically, we were always next game. And after we beat Liquid, we knew that we were strong, and that's when you lose this invincible mindset of whatever we get is enough. So you might have seen DC always tweeting, we only secured top 8, nothing more, etc. They kept reminding themselves that that they shouldn't be afraid to lose the Aegis. Let's put it like that. They're reminding themselves that they only got what they had right now, and that every other victory was just another victory. But when we beat Liquid, we got MVP next, and we know we can take MVP any day. So we had to do that, and that was pressure. And then once you're top 4, you feel like you have to make last day. And the only team in the way is DC, and we beat DC several times before. We knew what they were doing, but DC were not afraid to lose and not get that last day, and we were afraid not to get the last day.
That's interesting. And it seemed like that was actually came from a lot of the different teams that were in the top. I remember we heard an interview with Evil Geniuses, and the team, all the players almost individually across the board were saying things similar. Like, we had to realize we don't deserve to be on the top, that, we have to earn every single game. And it sounds like Fnatic and DC, you guys all sort of took that mentality, and it gave great performance. Unfortunately, like you said, you lost to DC. I think they caught everybody off guard, though. A lot of folks didn't expect them to go nearly as deep as they did. But it was a very cool run to see Fnatic. Now, Fnatic is no longer the same team that it used to be, guys. When we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. When we come back, we're going to talk about the new team, maybe see if they're dreaming of an Aegis, and talk to Kipspul about her future plans. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back for more Coffee with Toffees.
Game Leap wants to know, do you want to improve and win? With over 400 professional guides by 6.5k plus players updated daily, unleash your potential. Master the most up-to-date strategies and secrets of professional players. We guarantee that you will gain MMR and dominate. Visit us at www.game-leap.com.
All right, welcome back, guys. Me, Toffees, she, Kipspul. Let's talk about Fnatic and where it's going and where you're going. So if you guys don't know, if you're living under a rock or have just been very busy, like some of us have, as you guys know, my son just turned 2 and I got a lot going on. So I didn't even know. I had to double check with Kips before we started. But the new roster is out for Fnatic. It's Mushi, Ohio, Raven, AU, and Demon. This is a pretty vibrant lineup that should be pretty interesting. Now, before we talk about the lineup, I should ask you, are you still working with Fnatic? Are you at liberty to say? Are we working our way there? What's going on?
Working our way there is the right way to describe it. My contract was only up until TI, so we are currently renegotiating. I would really like to work with them again. They would also really like to work with me again. So we're figuring out what's the best way to do this.
Makes sense.
I hope I can actually announce we made a deal soon.
Good. And if you're watching Fnatic, now everybody knows she's not signed, so you better move faster because people will be looking. No, I'm kidding. But am I? All right, so we know that would be great. Now, I imagine if you're like me, you probably have a tie to the team. You're looking to work with them in the future. You're probably already thinking about this team, where they're going, what their potential is. Are you excited about this lineup? Do you think that it's going to be great for Fnatic? Can you give us any insight into sort of what you're looking forward to for this team?
What I think is the most interesting dynamic, and I think everyone does, is how is the Mushi Demon collaboration going to work out?
That will be interesting. And probably no insights there yet. I will say that Demon seems like a player who he's like an amplifier, right? Like, he amplifies whatever's happening on the team, the attitude, the play style, and sort of works with them. So I had never met Mushi in person. I know that you've had a chance to sort of see how he operates. What is he like as a leader?
Mushi, he has a lot of different ways of operating, really. I think that's the advantage of him being so experienced in this scene. He can be anything from a friendly educator to like a slave leader if he wants to, like just straight up. We do this now.
Nice. So hopefully he will have that sort of flexibility to really integrate well with Demon. And honestly, from chatting with the little bit that I got to see Demon and talked very briefly with him, it seems like he is really back in sort of the mix, excited to be part of the Dota 2 competitive scene again. I'm excited to see what he brings to Fnatic. Now, do you have, as somebody who's worked within the team setup, do you have any insight into the process of picking players? Or sort of how these teams are going about these shuffle changes? Like, did you get to be a part of that for Fnatic, or were you sort of left on the outside?
No, I very deliberately kept on the outside, really. I got some updates from people, of course, because I like to know what's going on.
Right.
And people like to keep me in a loop, obviously, because I might be working with them. But I did not actually influence anything, because it's all about these 5 guys and what they want out of next year, and also who's available.
Right.
There's a lot of chess games going on behind the scene, and I don't think many people understand how a shuffle works exactly. I mean, I don't understand it yet, and I knew and still know a lot more than most people.
Absolutely. And that's and for those of you, I mean, you guys listening know, like, the reason I don't do a ton of shows about the shuffle is because there's so much happening behind the scenes, and also little things like reporting incorrect information can cause a lot of trouble, because the teams are also a little bit in the dark about what other teams are doing. So if a rumor comes out about a transfer or a change or a perspective change that's not true, it can throw a lot of teams into disorder as they sort of have to figure out, is that real? Is it not real? How does that affect us? And I think that that's the chaos of the shuffle. Hopefully this new shuffle format has helped a little bit with the drop before the pickup. We saw in China, it didn't necessarily stop anything from going crazy. But it's definitely an interesting time for Dota. Speaking of interesting time, go ahead, I'm sorry.
One of the problems with the shuffle, something I really want to say actually, is that a lot of the information that gets leaked is actually often not incorrect. It's just not definite, and things change a lot, and they can change within hours. So people getting slammed for you were lying, or you leaked shit, who are your sources? No, it was definitely correct at that time, but you just shouldn't leak anything before it's final. If there's no signatures yet, it's not certain.
Absolutely, and keep in mind, sometimes leaks can also do things like shift leverage, which is something that can be really dangerous for a player who's trying to take care of themselves in the future, or an organization who's trying to sort of shore up some contracts. Leaks can often be just as dangerous as they are helpful. So a really good perspective there. Now, talking about the state of Dota now, there was an article that Will Parton wrote called "Are We Seeing the Beginning of Moneyballing in Dota?" And it was sort of this idea of, we're seeing a lot of teams hiring analysts. We know that Fnatic was using you. We know that Complexity was using Mott Packs. There are a few other teams that had analysts on board that maybe weren't as publicly touted as you guys were. It seemed like in that article he was saying, we're not quite at that stage, but we are using a lot more numbers. What are your thoughts? Are we moving towards a point of heavy number functionality in Dota, or is it still really based on feel?
Depends on who you ask, I think. I mean, there are just players who can do all these calculations in their head, where they click on, they're playing Lila, they click on someone, they calculate the magic resist, they look at their Laguna blade, they see if they can, get a veil on them, and then they blow them up because they know they can. Something like that. DJ's Shadow Demon kill on the on Loda at TI. Purge even did a segment about that one. Like, DJ was making all these calculations in his head.
Right.
So, and he solo killed Loda as a Shadow Demon. That was really impressive. So, making it about the numbers, there are a lot of players that already play on the numbers within the game. And I can sort of drag those numbers out to use. But calling it a Moneyball moment is weird for me, because Moneyball was all about working on a budget. And if you want to do that, you should scour pubs for good players and make a prediction model to see how well they would probably do in competitive, and then just put them together and make it work.
So
that
and there's
would be
my
Moneyball moment.
But I guess there's my question, because it feels like, to a certain extent, the last integration of Secret, I don't want to say Moneyball because they weren't on a budget, but they definitely picked people who statistically...
They were on a budget, all right.
Right. But, I mean, they should have worked well together. They should have performed well. They should have won on paper. Is the fact that Dota is such a heavy-duty team game and communication is so important still a bigger importance than finding people who sort of fit the numbers? What's the most important part of putting a team together, in your opinion?
They need to be able to keep talking to each other under great stress.
Okay.
It's like personal skill. I want to write a piece about that. I want to see how many players at TI were under 6K. I want to know, because there must have been several.
Yeah.
But those people can talk, and they keep talking, and they have ideas, and they can work with others. And that is, to me, in the end, once you rise above the pubs, way more important.
Let me ask you this. In your opinion as an analyst, and this can be non-scientific if you want, I'm just curious, what do you think the most important role on the team is? And not captain, I'm talking, your typical lane positions, 4-5s, whatever that sort of falls into.
I feel, at least in the meta as it's been, roughly the past season, I think offlane has had this ridiculous impact. Like, the offlane has been the position with both farm and the freedom to dedicate to tempo.
Okay.
And I think that has made it perhaps even more, in my opinion, it has made it even more important than mid or carry or any of the supports, because you get to do everything basically.
And that's a position that is very dependent on communication because there's nobody else sort of in lane helping them, so they have to make sure the team knows what's going on at all times. So that can also sort of, I think, play into why communication's been so important lately. Now, as an analyst for Fnatic, is the analyst role pretty the same across the board? I feel like I've heard Motpax was a lot more statistic based, perhaps, in his analysis than sort of what you were doing with Fnatic, which had a little touch of coaching to it. What is it like? Give us an insight into the experience of being an analyst for a Dota team.
I have only worked for one team, so that's a bit of a tough question.
But I'm sure you've talked with others, right? Or have a rough idea of what they do.
I do have a rough idea. Like, a lot of analysts actually do watch the replays, because there's a lot of analysts that are ex-players or semi-pros, and they are really, how do you say it? They're really attached to the in-game vision, and a lot of teams prefer it that way. I have had just a no from several squads because they're like, we don't see exactly what you could bring to us. And even within the team, there's a lot of reevaluations and evolution going on. I've been redefining the way I show opposing drafts. We've done several ways of displaying opposing signature heroes, ward maps, that sort of thing. It's a constant evolution of trying to find what suits the players who are going to need that information.
Makes sense.
I focus on it a lot, actually. I think it's one of the most important parts of the job is being able to communicate within half an hour, like all of my information. And that's tough. And I can do a lot more improving there.
And I think that that's something we don't actually talk about very often, is we know that these teams have analysts who are good numbers people, but it's not just about the numbers, right? Because like you said, you have to present it to the team. You have to vocalize it to them. You have to, I'm sure in many situations, how do you say, be cordial or approach something that might be a little bit of a tough topic for a certain player. Have you found yourself in those situations where you're like, I know he's not going to want to hear this, but I've got to tell him anyway?
Yeah, it's like, telling Mushi he should probably not go Manta Lincolns on Dusa. That is a moment where you're kind of pinching yourself, right? Twitch chat is saying it, Reddit is saying it, your entire Twitter feed is full, and you can just tap him on the shoulder, look him in the eye, and say, if you go that build again, I'm gonna murder you. And he's like, sure. And then he
Nice.
does it again.
And then he does.
And they win.
Yeah.
Because he's an asshole.
Oh, you heard? I don't think you heard it here first, but you heard it here. But I mean, so that's.
He
Go
just
ahead.
does his thing, man.
That's funny.
And it's you gotta appreciate that too, because if I say something stupid, he won't be okay. He will be like, no,
Right.
no.
But I mean, the fact that he's willing to listen, and I think we all love Dota because of the fact that it's not a 32 hero meta, that every item build isn't right for every situation. There's a lot of sort of that flexibility to it. And do you think that that level of flexibility and change in Dota is why we've seen an increase in sort of analysts and coaches and support staff for teams versus, say, other games that we don't see quite as much of that?
I know, for example, in Fnatic that they're actually also setting up an analytics department for League, but it's harder because their client doesn't really like the data mining the way that we do.
Right.
So sometimes it's also about technical difficulties.
Makes
But
sense.
in the sense of Dota, the changes are so important.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about what are they doing well or what are their weaknesses, but also about who finds out the patch first, if there is something to find. Like, if you can identify the team that got it and you can, learn from them, do it better.
So you brought up
And
patches. You brought up patches, and this is a question that I think I have as an average player, and I think a lot of average casual players.
I'm an average player too.
Okay. But you understand numbers better than most average players do. So when we see a patch come out and we see a change to a hero that's, X hero has had armor increased by 1 or has move speed decreased by 0.5 or something, that to us seems so, like when I read, I'm like, that's minuscule. That's not going to affect the hero very much. But then all of a sudden that hero just falls off or joins the meta in a really aggressive way. Why is that? Why is it that such small changes to heroes can have such a major impact on the way that the pro scene is played?
It's trends, really. Like, the meta is, how do you say it? Like, we all know memes as something that gets spammed in Twitch chat, right?
Right.
Copy pastas and whatever. But the original idea of a meme, like a sort of a cultural idea or sensation or a piece of knowledge that gets passed about. Once a changelog like that comes out, every hero gets changed, and someone who looks at the patch notes goes like, this is good or this is bad. And if it's bad, the connotation of bad kind of clings to that hero. So it gets drafted a little bit less. And something else is going to get drafted a little bit more, and other teams are going to look at those drafts, and they are also going to draft that hero a little bit less. And then, 3 weeks later, Morana is out of the meta, and she'll stay there for a little bit until everyone realizes that she's still good, and then she comes right back and dominates TI.
Interesting. So it's not as much about the marginal changes so much as the way that it changes the group perception or sort of group think, I guess, in terms of people playing. That's really interesting because I think a lot of times as an average player, a casual who sort of lives in the 3K trench world, you see a change like that, you see the pros stop using a hero, and you're like, must be a crappy hero now, I'm just not going to run it anymore. And then somebody puts the Mirana in anyway and destroys you, and you go, oh, I guess that was wrong. It's an interesting perspective, and definitely like to hear that sort of thing, especially from someone who I know understands numbers. I always just assumed that I was too dumb to understand scaling principles or something like that. That's interesting. So before we close out, we got just a minute or two left here. Let me ask you, what is the hardest part of being an analyst for a team? And what is the most amazing part of being an analyst for a team?
The hardest part for me personally, like for the job itself, is deciding what's relevant and what's not. What do I tell them? What do I not tell them? Because I make really tough decisions in that regard. I find way more than I tell them, but that's not, you gotta not overload them.
Right.
They can't do anything if you overload them with information. You're just adding to the pile of things they already have to deal with. And then personally, the hardest thing is to not completely burn myself out.
Yeah.
It's just, like I want to get those 8 to 10 hours in, but if you look at how much time you usually have to prepare for match, and you still need to eat and sleep, like that's usually not going to work out. So I need to try and keep myself from dying 2 days into a tournament if it's going to last for 5 if you keep winning.
Right. That's true. And so when you're watching a game, uh, have you already sort of prepared for the next team in line? Like as you're watching Fnatic players or watching two teams go at each other. So what are you doing to prepare for the next team, I guess is the best question at a tournament. Because you don't know, maybe you get 2 hours ahead notice. Like what's the best practice to prepare for that?
Mm, I guess you look at both, and I usually ask the guys specifically which team they're more afraid of,
Okay.
because that way you let them make the decision, and then, like, if I make that decision on my own, and I never even ask them, I just prepare one team more than the other, and then that's not the team that went through. Then, yeah, I get some explaining to do.
That makes sense. And the way that you're doing it, if they get the team they want, they have a confidence boost. And if they get the team they're scared of, they get a confidence boost because you've got information to help them beat that team. And that's something that it seems like in Dota, a lot of victory, and you kind of brought this up when you talked in your blog about beating Liquid, comes from confidence and preparation and sort of believing in yourself. And I think you even mentioned that you saw Matumbo Man's face in their game and how he just looked tired and a little bit beaten down and said, okay, well, now we've got a really good chance of doing this because they don't have the right mindset. So it does sound like that really helps in that area. And now back to the question, what's the best part for you of being a team analyst?
The best part is that because I work with the players so much, it's a privilege all on its own, of course.
Right.
But getting to go through the hard times and then just working hard as a squad and coming back out on top, that's great. That's one of the best feelings in the world, really.
Makes sense. Now, I'm going to put up a picture here for you guys. This is a Fnatic family photo that they all took together. Did you feel like part of the family in your time with Fnatic?
Definitely. They were so kind, and they, like, in the first hours I kind of had to, they were kind of like, who is this person? And then it was Adam. It was 343, and he just started talking drafts with me. And it was the same night I arrived in Manila, and we just talked drafts for 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
And from the moment that we did that, he sort of radiated this, hey, she's cool. And then the rest of them were like, hey, she's cool. And from that point on, it was just like, hey, Muri, can you tell me this? Hey, Muri, can you do this for me? Can you do that? You want to go out for dinner? Like, the moment where Mushi asks, he's going out for KFC, he's like, shall I bring you some? I'm like, yeah, this is my family now.
Nice.
That's such a great feeling.
Well, and it seems like, I think it might have been Arteezy that said it a long time ago, or somebody in that vein, that sort of became a meme where he said, I'm just a boy who wants to play Dota. And it does seem like the more that I talk to analysts and support staff and coaches, it feels that way. Honestly, we sort of put these players on pedestals because of how well it's Mushi. Like, if I met Mushi or playing a game, I'd be like, oh shit, it's Mushi. Like, I whatever you say, man. But at the end of the day, like, they're just guys who love this game and want to play it and do it as a living. And it seems like they're just real people, and I think that that's pretty cool. I mean, that's been my experience. Has been that yours as well? That once you get to know them, they're just people who love Dota.
Yeah, they're just people that love Dota, and there's kind of something else that comes with that, is that they're not perfect, not by a long shot. Like, people keep saying that, like, but you're 2.7k, how can you tell them that they're doing something wrong? Well, you don't need MMR to see when someone is doing something wrong. And I get let's call it a privilege, because it is, I get to say, hey, you should do that differently. And that's it changes your perspective a lot.
Nice.
But then again, the thing with Ohio and the replays, for example, you think like, well, never mind. I know nothing. Call me Jon Snow. They will just as often remind you that they have amazing skills that you never thought about.
And it's interesting too, because I think that this is I want to point out it's funny that anybody who lives between the 2 and the 4K bracket considers everything a tier. So you said the 2.7 tier, like, you know, there's this really focused 100 MMR tier of players. But it's interesting that we sort of bring this up, the idea that you may play at a 2.7, but a lot of that comes down to mechanical and execution and sort of these things, like you said. The Fnatic players can watch a replay at 8x speed and process everything. The rest of us who are normal human beings can't. I'm 34 years old. My mind, I guess, has gone because I know what I should be doing, but I can't click the buttons fast enough sometimes to do it. There's a wealth of knowledge that somebody like you that has in that 2.7K bracket that can even help teams like Fnatic perform better. So I think, if anything, for those of you who are listening, some of you may be 2K players, some of you may be 5K players. Don't just write off what your teammates say, because MMR in a lot of ways can be irrelevant when it comes to analysis and understanding the game, because maybe just the execution or the experience for that execution isn't quite there. Is there any other thoughts or anything you want to share before we sign out for the day, Kipspul?
just go for Kips. Like,
okay.
the second part is very Dutch, and everyone
Perfect.
stumbled over that.
I thought it was just from your carries always screaming at you, Kips, pull the camp, hurry up and stack.
It means chicken stuff in Dutch.
Intriguing.
And actually the separation is at Kipspul, chicken stuff.
Chicken
But
stuff.
in English it's better to separate it at Kips. So
Nice.
that's where we ended up.
All right, so final thoughts, chicken stuff?
Final thoughts are, well, I am really looking forward to spending a full year with a team. I hope it's going to be Fnatic, but perhaps it's going to be someone else. And it's going to be great to actually see the entire development of a squad, from like these people coming together to, you know, taking on TI all the way at the end. I am looking forward to that so much.
Absolutely. And hopefully we see that. I look forward to seeing these teams stay together more effectively throughout the year. I think some of our teams have proven that that's really a great thing this last year. Hopefully, I hope to see you sign with Fnatic, since that's what you want. If not, good luck wherever you end up. I'm glad that we've had you on the show, so maybe now we can pull you in for insights into teams after tournaments or before, and just kind of get that behind the scenes look, because it's really cool to see. You know, we have Nahaz on here, we have Motpacks. It's really neat to see the different avenues of functionality that the people behind the scenes have, because like we said, Motpacks, Nahaz, Kips, you guys all have very different roles but very similar titles. And I think that that's something that's interesting as to how these teams function at their core. So, guys, thank you for tuning in. A big thank you to Kips for being here to join us. You can find her at Kipspul, that's Kipspul, over on the Twitter if you want to follow her. You can find her blog over on Median, where she definitely is giving some insights into drafting. TI, there was a really cool insight into how Fnatic performed there. And like, I think, 5 to 10 minute reads, so a really easy thing to sort of check out. A lot of fun. Also, obviously, follow Fnatic. I may as well say that since, you know, we've been talking about them so much. You can find me at Toffees TV, and a big shout out to Asus, Razer, Pro Built Systems, and of course, GameLeap.com, the only place where you can learn to play like a pro from a pro, for making the show possible. Do you have any shout outs or upcoming plans you want us to know about?
Yeah, just a shout out to Fnatic last year for having me along for the ride. It was great. Thanks especially to Karn also. He's been absolutely amazing. It's so good to have support like that from your organization. So thank you to them.
Are we going to thank you to Cart as well? Are you guys? Is there any details there that we should know about Cart, Dota, and you?
Any details? I'm afraid we are not anymore.
Oh no! Well, I shouldn't have brought that up.
TI
Uncomfortable.
claimed a victim.
TI claims many victims. Tough times. That said, though, I think that it was really cool to see you guys there. It was really cool to sort of see the emergence of Kips within Fnatic, from a writer to an analyst to a partial coach. It was very, very cool to sort of see you doing your thing at TI, and I hope to see it again next year, and hopefully sooner, maybe some of the majors. So, guys, thanks for tuning in. Have a wonderful day. And as always, Toffee's out. I don't know why I lost track there for a second. Whatever. See ya!